ever had someone treat you like you don't belong? Imagine being on a plane, just minding your business, when a racist woman tries to throw you out of business class. But here's the twist. She had no idea who she was messing with. This shocking incident took place on a flight where a white woman, for no reason other than his appearance, decided a black man didn't deserve to sit in business class. She thought she could kick him out without a second thought. What she didn't know was that the man she tried to insult wasn't just another passenger. He was the owner of the entire airline. Yep, the very airline she was flying on. What happens next is something you won't believe. The problem begins the moment the woman's attitude shifts, her eyes scanning the business class cabin, and she zeroes in on a black man sitting by the window. At first, everything seems normal, just a typical flight, a typical situation. But it's not. The woman's prejudices are about to surface in a way that no one could have predicted. She glances at him one too many times, her judgmental eyes narrowing. She doesn't see him as a person, she sees him as a threat, an imposter in a space she believes is reserved for people like her. In her mind, business class is for people who belong, people who fit her narrow idea of success. And the man sitting across from her? He doesn't fit that mold, not in her eyes. He's not wearing a designer suit or carrying an expensive briefcase, and to her, that means he's out of place. Without warning, the woman speaks up, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the plane's cabin. "Excuse me," she says, a condescending tone lacing her words. "You're in my seat." She gestures toward the empty seat beside her, as though it's the only one that matters, her fingers pointed with unmistakable arrogance. The man, taken aback for a moment, looks around to see if she's talking to him. Her eyes are locked on him, her gaze unwavering, and he realizes she's serious. She's accusing him of sitting in a seat that doesn't belong to him. But what she doesn't know is that her assumptions couldn't be more wrong. This man isn't some random passenger who got confused and ended up in the wrong spot. He belongs in that seat more than she'll ever know. His face remains calm, but his mind begins to process the absurdity of her request. Why is she treating him like he's an intruder? What makes her feel so entitled to decide who belongs in business class and who doesn't? The injustice of the situation begins to hit him, but he chooses not to engage right away. He lets her have her moment, not because he's intimidated, but because he understands that people like her only react to one thing, confrontation. But instead of backing down, the woman digs in. She presses the call button for the flight attendant, clearly annoyed that the man isn't moving from what she has deemed her seat. She doesn't care that he's already settled in, that he's got his things tucked neatly beside him. She's made up her mind, and nothing's going to change that. She speaks to the attendant as though she has all the authority in the world, her words dripping with entitlement. "This man is sitting in my seat," she declares, voice rising slightly. "He doesn't belong here. He needs to be moved." At this point, the flight attendant looks between the two of them, unsure of how to handle the situation. The woman's tone is harsh, and the accusation is direct, but it's clear that the attendant is hesitant. She's worked on enough flights to know that not every claim is as simple as it seems. She asks the man if he has a boarding pass to confirm his seat assignment, and he calmly pulls it out, showing that he's in the right spot. But the woman doesn't back down. Her face flushes with frustration, and her voice rises in volume as she presses the issue. "No, I'm telling you, he doesn't belong here. He's not supposed to be in business class." The words spill out like venom, each one coated with prejudice and ignorance. She continues to insist that the man be moved, even though the flight attendant has already confirmed that he's in the right seat. The problem isn't his ticket. It's her own inability to accept that someone like him could possibly be sitting in the section she's deemed for herself and people like her. The woman's racist attitude is on full display now, and it's impossible to ignore. She's made the assumption that because of the man's appearance, his skin color, his style of dress, he doesn't belong in a place of privilege. She believes business class is for people who look like her, wealthy, well-dressed, and polished. Anyone else in her mind is an outsider. She doesn't see the humanity in him. All she sees is a stereotype. The man, however, isn't just some random individual trying to blend into an environment that makes others uncomfortable. He is calm and composed, his response measured. He doesn't lash out, doesn't raise his voice, but he knows something that the woman doesn't. This flight isn't just another flight for him. He's not just a passenger. He's the owner of the airline. The challenge here isn't just about one woman's blatant racism. It's the bigger issue of how people like her constantly feel entitled to judge others based on superficial and discriminatory views. She assumes that because he's not wearing a designer suit or acting like she thinks a business class passenger should, he must not belong. In her world, there's a strict hierarchy, and she expects everyone to fall in line with her version of what's acceptable. But the challenge for the man isn't just dealing with this woman's prejudice. It's also about how he handles the situation. Does he confront her right away, or does he let her continue in her ignorance, knowing the truth about who he is? It's a delicate balance. On one hand, he could have immediately revealed his identity, taking the power away from her and putting her in her place. On the other hand, he could remain silent, letting her dig her own grave as she continues to make a fool of herself. As tensions rise, the flight attendant steps away, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The woman is still insisting that the man be removed from business class, now making passive-aggressive comments about the airline's lack of standards. She's oblivious to the fact that she's insulting the very person who owns the airline she's flying with. It's a situation where the problem isn't just about a person being treated unfairly. It's about how systemic prejudice can blind people to the truth. They think they have power over others, but in reality, they're just proving their ignorance. As the woman's demands escalate, the tension in the cabin becomes undeniable. The flight attendants have already tried to de-escalate the situation, but the woman isn't having it. She's convinced that her version of events is the truth, and nothing's going to change her mind. But this is where the development of the situation takes an unexpected turn. The man, still calm, watches as the woman continues her rant. Her voice grows louder, her insults more pointed, but he remains unfazed. He's already aware of the growing attention around them, Passengers are starting to notice, eyes flicking toward the scene unfolding in business class. The flight attendants are visibly uncomfortable, unsure of how to handle the situation. But the man doesn't rush to resolve it. He lets the woman talk herself deeper into a hole. She's now trying to involve other passengers, making sweeping statements about how the airline has gone downhill by letting people like him sit in business class. She's creating a spectacle, and it's not just uncomfortable for the man, it's uncomfortable for everyone around. The whispers grow louder, and soon there's a clear divide forming. On one side, there are the passengers who can sense the woman's hostility and can't help but feel uneasy about her behavior. On the other side, there are those who start to take notice of the man's composure. Something about the way he's handling this situation piques their curiosity. But even as the woman continues her tirade, she's missing something crucial: the man's reaction. She's so consumed by her need to be right that she hasn't stopped to consider who this person really is. She hasn't considered that he might have a valid reason for being in business class, maybe even a more legitimate reason than she does. After all, what does she know about him? Nothing. But in her mind, she's already decided he's not worthy of the seat. And now she's trying to drag others into her warped perception. The flight attendants are caught in the middle of this escalating drama, but they still don't know what to do. They've checked his boarding pass, but this isn't just a simple case of mistaken seat assignments anymore. The situation has shifted into something far more personal, far more confrontational. But even as they look at the woman with a mix of confusion and caution, the man doesn't speak up right away. He watches her, observes how she becomes increasingly irrational with each passing second. This is her moment to dig herself deeper. And she does. She turns to the flight attendants again, and this time her words drip with disdain. "You don't need to let people like him into your first-class cabin," she says. "The airline used to be more exclusive." The snide remark isn't just a slight against the man. It's an insult to everyone who doesn't fit her narrow idea of who should belong in business class. It's the epitome of her entitlement. But still, the man remains silent, unfazed. He understands that sometimes the best way to deal with ignorance is not to respond. He doesn't want to fuel her anger, doesn't want to give her any more of the attention she so desperately craves. Instead, he lets her ramble on, the absurdity of her words becoming more evident with every sentence. He knows he doesn't need to explain himself to anyone, let alone a stranger who feels entitled to judge him based on nothing more than his appearance. As the minutes drag on, the flight attendants are beginning to feel the weight of the situation. The woman's complaints are growing more erratic, and her sense of entitlement is shining through with every word she speaks. She's not just insulting one man, she's casting a judgment on the entire airline. She's questioning the credibility of the service, as though she knows better than anyone what's acceptable in business class. But it's at this point that the man decides it's time to act. He could have kept quiet, could have let the situation unfold as it was, but something inside him tells him it's time to reveal the truth. He doesn't owe this woman any explanation, but he's about to give her one she'll never forget. In a calm and controlled voice, he finally speaks up. "Ma'am," he says, the words sharp but steady. "You seem to be under the impression that I don't belong here. What you don't know is that I actually own this airline." The woman's face freezes for a moment, as if she doesn't quite register the meaning of his words. She blinks, unsure if she heard him right. "Excuse me?" she says, her tone laced with disbelief. The man, without missing a beat, repeats, "I'm the owner of this airline." The words hit her like a ton of bricks, and for the first time, there's a noticeable shift in her demeanor. She stammers for a moment, her face flushing with embarrassment. Her eyes dart around the cabin, and it's as if the whole world suddenly starts closing in on her. The passengers who were once silently observing now begin to exchange glances, their curiosity piqued. The woman's jaw tightens, her mind racing to make sense of what's happening. How could she have been so wrong? How could she have made such a foolish assumption? And worse yet, how could she have treated him so horribly when he was the one in control the whole time? The moment the man reveals that he is the owner of the airline, the woman's face turns pale. It's like she's just been slapped across the face with reality, and her brain is trying to process it all at once. Her mouth opens and closes, as if searching for words that won't come. For a brief second, there's complete silence. The entire cabin seems to hold its breath, watching the woman's reaction. Her world, for just that moment, shatters. Everything she believed about this situation collapses in on her. The smugness she carried with her, the belief that she could call the shots, has crumbled to dust. She no longer has the power in this interaction. Her entitlement, once the driving force of her actions, now stands exposed as nothing more than ignorance. "Wait," she stammers, her eyes darting from the man to the flight attendants, who are now nervously watching her every move. The once confident, arrogant woman now looks small, her confidence slipping away with every passing second. You own this airline?" The words leave her mouth in disbelief, as though she's struggling to understand the enormity of her mistake. The man nods, his expression calm but firm. "Yes, I do." His voice is steady, each word carrying weight. There's no anger in his tone, no satisfaction in watching her squirm, just an unwavering truth. He watches as the reality of the situation sinks into her mind, and her face flushes a deep shade of red. Her pride has been bruised in a way she never anticipated. Around the cabin, the passengers who have been silently observing are now shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some are looking away, avoiding eye contact with the woman who had become the center of attention. Others can't help but stare at the woman, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. It's not just the fact that she misjudged him. It's the sheer audacity with which she tried to remove him from his rightful seat. Her attempt to humiliate him in front of everyone has failed spectacularly, and the atmosphere in business class has turned from uncomfortable to almost painfully awkward. The woman's gaze flickers nervously between the man and the flight attendants, who are now uncertain how to proceed. They had been trained to handle difficult passengers, but nothing could have prepared them for this. The flight attendants have seen their share of rude and entitled customers, But the level of arrogance displayed by this woman, coupled with the fact that the man is the owner of the airline, has caught them off guard. They now look at the woman with a mix of pity and disbelief, unsure if they should speak up or simply let her continue to dig herself deeper. The woman, now realizing the severity of the situation, begins to sputter out half-hearted apologies. I didn't know," she says weakly. "I didn't mean. I wasn't trying to." The man cuts her off, his voice unwavering. "You didn't think at all. You assumed that just because of the way I look, I didn't belong here. But that's not how this works. You don't get to judge who belongs and who doesn't based on your own narrow view of the world." The woman's lips tremble as she tries to find the right words, but they never come. The weight of the moment presses down on her. There's no coming back from this. She's humiliated herself in front of everyone, including the very man she tried to belittle. She thought her status and privilege could protect her, that they could shield her from the consequences of her actions. But now, in front of a whole plane of people, her false sense of superiority is crumbling away. As the seconds tick by, she realizes the depth of her mistake. Her apology, if it could even be called that, is weak and insincere. The man doesn't need her apology. He doesn't want her to grovel. What he needs, and what she's going to have to come to terms with, is the lesson in humility. She has to understand that the world doesn't revolve around her, and her sense of entitlement. Her prejudice has been exposed, and no amount of backpedaling can take away what she's done. The flight attendants exchange looks, unsure of how to handle the next steps. The man's calmness has made it clear that he's not interested in further drama. The woman, on the other hand, can barely meet anyone's gaze. Her pride is shattered, and she's left standing there, a victim of her own actions. The key movement in this moment isn't just about the man revealing his identity. It's about how the woman's arrogance has been unraveled. She's been forced to confront her own prejudices and the dangerous assumptions she made. The power she thought she had has now been handed back to the man, and she's left to face the consequences of her own ignorance. The woman, now completely defeated, sits back in her seat, her face flushed with embarrassment. The reality of her actions has finally hit her, but it's too late for apologies or explanations. The man, on the other hand, remains calm and composed, his silence now more powerful than any words could be. He doesn't need to rub her mistake in her face. Her humiliation is already more than enough. As the flight continues, the atmosphere in the cabin slowly returns to normal. The passengers, who were once whispering and exchanging glances, now settle back into their seats, but the tension of the moment lingers in the air. The woman has learned a harsh lesson in humility, but it's a lesson she won't soon forget. Her attempt to exert power over someone she deemed unworthy has not only backfired, has exposed her own prejudices and entitlement in a way she can't deny. For the man, this moment is just another reminder that actions have consequences, and it's better to let people reveal their true character than to get caught up in pointless conflict. He doesn't seek revenge. He simply lets the truth speak for itself. The story ends not with victory or defeat, but with a silent, undeniable truth that speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. Don't judge a book by its cover. Subscribe for more unbelievable stories.